Welcome to the deep dive. So we all know that feeling, right? That little boost we get from seeing something adorable or peaceful, like a cat napping in a sunbeam,
Oh, yeah.
or a dog excitedly greeting you at the door,
I love that.
even just listening to birds singing.
Mm-hmm.
Little soul soothers, right?
Definitely.
But one of our listeners, well, they shared something really interesting, something a bit different. They find that same sense of healing, that same peace from watching squirrels. Specifically, watching squirrels eating nuts.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. And honestly, it made us curious, too. Like, what is it about that specific thing that really grabs you and makes you feel good?
Yeah. Like in a world full of these, big, majestic things in nature,
Right.
mountains and oceans and all that.
Exactly.
Why a squirrel? Why that simple act of eating a nut? What makes that feel so profound?
That's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We're going to look at everything from our basic connection to nature to the psychology of observing things, maybe even a bit of sensory stuff too.
Yeah.
So, we're hoping to shed some light on why something so seemingly simple
Right.
can be so powerful for you.
Absolutely.
So where do we even begin with this? I guess first we got to talk about our relationship with nature.
Yeah. Like, why do we even care about nature in the first place?
Exactly. And that's where this idea, this biophilia hypothesis comes in. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, definitely.
Basically, it suggests that humans, deep down, have this built-in need to connect with nature.
Like, it's part of us.
Totally. It's not just a preference. It's
Yeah.
this fundamental part of being human. And there's a guy, E.O. Wilson, he's a biologist. He talks about how this connection actually helped our ancestors survive,
Okay.
Like back in the day, knowing your environment was crucial.
Right.
You had to be able to spot food. You had to know which plants were safe, which animals were dangerous.
Yeah, like it was life or death.
Literally. So this affinity for nature, it wasn't just nice to have, it was essential.
Right, yeah.
Which is why we still feel drawn to it today, even if we don't realize it.
It's like this deep instinctual thing.
Totally. But here's the thing. In our modern world, a lot of us are kind of disconnected from that natural environment.
Yeah, we're spending so much time indoors, in cities, glued to our screens.
Exactly. And that lack of connection, well, it can actually mess with us.
Yeah, it can. There's a bunch of research showing how being disconnected from nature can lead to increased stress, anxiety.
Even depression.
Yeah, and that's where this concept of nature connectedness comes in. It's about, how close you feel to the natural world.
Oh, interesting.
And studies have shown that people who feel more connected to nature tend to be happier. They have a stronger sense of purpose, too.
So it's not just about, being out in the wilderness.
No. It's about that feeling of connection, even in small ways.
Like watching a squirrel.
Exactly. It's about tuning into those moments, no matter how small they seem.
I like that. So we've got this foundation of why nature matters to us. But what about observing wildlife specifically? What's going on there?
Well, there's tons of research showing that watching animals can be really good for us mentally and emotionally. It can boost our mood, make us feel calmer, more relaxed.
Oh, I totally believe that. I know there was one study where people watched marine animals,
Yeah.
and afterward, they reported feeling all these positive emotions, happy, calm, excited, awestruck.
Right, all those good feelings.
And it makes sense, right? When you're observing something in its natural habitat, it's kind of like a window into a different world.
Yeah, and it can be really awe-inspiring.
Totally. It's not just about the pretty sights, though. There's something about observing animals that can make us feel more connected, like we belong to something bigger.
Like a sense of unity.
Exactly. And some people even describe it as a spiritual experience.
Yeah,
Especially if they feel like the animal is acknowledging them.
like a shared moment.
Right, there's this mutual awareness. And it's not just a feel-good thing either. There are stories of people finding solace in nature during tough times,
Oh, yeah.
like when they're grieving or feeling down.
Nature can be really comforting.
It can. And even beyond the emotional stuff, just the act of focusing on observing something, really paying attention to the details of how an animal moves, how it interacts with its surroundings,
Yeah.
that can be really therapeutic in itself.
It can. It's kind of like entering a state of flow. You know?
Yeah, that feeling of being totally absorbed in the moment.
Exactly. You forget about your worries, your to-do list.
Yeah.
It's just you and that squirrel. and nothing else matters.
So it's like a mini mental vacation.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just direct encounters with animals either.
Wow.
Even spending time in green spaces like parks or gardens can have a positive impact on our mental well-being.
So there's definitely something about nature in general that just makes us feel better.
For sure.
Okay, so we know that connecting with nature is good for us. And watching animals can be particularly rewarding.
Right.
But why squirrels? What is it about them that makes them so,
Soul healing.
exact?
Well, for one, they're just plain adorable.
Oh, come on. Who doesn't love a fluffy-tailed squirrel?
Right. And they're so full of energy, always scampering around, doing their little acrobatics.
You never know what they're going to do next.
It's like a little comedy show right outside your window.
Totally. But you mentioned feeling calm while watching them, which seems kind of counterintuitive considering they're often so hyperactive.
True.
Eh.
But there's a difference between watching them frantically bury a nut and watching them actually eat it.
Oh, I see.
When they're eating, they're still focused.
Yeah. Okay.
And that can be surprisingly calming for us to watch.
Mm.
There's a concept called soft fascination, where our attention is drawn in a gentle way. Like it's not demanding. It doesn't require a lot of effort. And that allows our minds to relax, to recover from all that mental strain we experience in our daily lives.
So it's like a little mental break without even trying.
Exactly. And squirrels are so accessible.
Yeah, they're practically everywhere.
They're in our parks, our backyards. We see them all the time. And that familiarity can create a sense of connection, like they're part of our community.
It's like, oh, there's my little squirrel neighbor again.
Right. And we tend to anthropomorphize animals.
Oh, yeah, like give them human qualities.
We project our own thoughts and feelings onto them. So when we see a squirrel carefully burying a nut for later, it's almost like we're seeing a reflection of our own desire for security, our need to plan for the future.
It's like we see a bit of ourselves in them.
Yeah, and that can be really comforting.
Okay, so we've got the cuteness, the accessibility, the relatable behavior.
Right.
But let's talk about the actual act of watching a squirrel eat. You mentioned mindfulness earlier, and it feels like there's a strong connection there.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Watching a squirrel eat can be a fantastic way to practice mindfulness. It's about focusing on the present moment, noticing all the details without judgment.
Like what kind of details?
Well, think about it. How does the squirrel hold the nut?
Oh, yeah.
What are its little paws doing?
Right.
Does it take tiny bites or big chomps?
Right.
Does it look around while it's eating?
Okay.
Every little movement, every little sound, it's all part of the experience.
And when you're really focused on those details,
Mm-hmm.
you're not thinking about your worries. You're not dwelling on the past.
Exactly. You're just there in the moment with the squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
And nature has this amazing ability to ground us like that.
Yeah, it really does.
It brings us back to the present, which is where true peace can be found.
So it's like a form of meditation almost.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And the more we engage our senses, the deeper that experience becomes. We're not just seeing the squirrel, we're hearing the crunching sounds.
Right.
Or we might even imagine the feel of the nut, the texture of the squirrel's fur.
Okay.
All those sensory details, they work together to create this really immersive, mindful experience.
And it doesn't have to stop there, right? Like even later on, when you're not watching the squirrel anymore, just the memory of that experience can bring back some of that calm.
Totally. It's like a little mental souvenir that you can carry with you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know spending time in nature is good for reducing stress, but how does squirrel watching specifically fit into that?
Well, there's a ton of research showing that just being in nature can lower our blood pressure, reduce stress hormones, and boost those feel-good chemicals in our brains.
Oh, like endorphins.
Exactly. And when you're watching a squirrel, particularly when it's eating, it's like they're showing you how to just be.
To just be.
Yeah. Like they're not worried about anything. They're not dwelling on the past or stressing about the future.
Right.
They're just completely present in the moment,
Yeah.
enjoying their nut. And that can be a powerful reminder for us.
To slow down, take a breath, and appreciate the simple things.
Exactly. And even though there aren't like specific studies on squirrel watching and stress reduction,
Correct.
anecdotally, people talk about how calming it is all the time.
Yeah, we saw tons of comments online about how watching squirrels helps people de-stress. Like it takes them out of their own heads for a little while.
It's like a mental reset button.
Exactly. And some people even find deeper meaning in squirrel behavior.
Yeah.
Like they see it as a metaphor for life.
Interesting.
You know, the way they gather and store food, it reminds them of the importance of being resourceful,
Ooh, I like that.
or their playful nature. It inspires them to be more lighthearted,
Yeah.
even their ability to overcome obstacles.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It teaches them about resilience and determination.
Yeah. Even though these are just personal interpretations, it's fascinating how we can draw these meaningful connections from observing something as simple as a squirrel.
Totally. It's like they're teaching us little life lessons without even realizing it.
Maybe they are.
Okay, let's talk about the sensory experience a bit more. We've touched on the visual and auditory aspects. But can you unpack those a bit more? Like, how do they contribute to this sense of well-being?
Sure. First, there's the visual focus.
Okay.
Our eyes are naturally drawn to movement,
Right.
and squirrels provide plenty of that.
We do.
They're constantly moving, twitching, adjusting their position.
Yeah.
And those subtle movements, they capture our attention without being overwhelming. It's a gentle form of visual stimulation.
Like a moving meditation, almost.
You could say that.
Hmm?
And then there are the sounds.
The crunching, the gnawing.
Exactly. Those natural sounds, they're like a form of auditory therapy.
Okay.
There's a bunch of research showing that natural sounds can be really calming and relaxing. They help to reduce stress and promote a sense of peace.
Almost like a natural ASMR, right?
Yeah, kind of. And then there's also the tactile imagination, which is fascinating.
Tactile imagination.
Yeah. Even though we're not physically touching the squirrel or the nut, our brains might still be processing those textures.
Oh, interesting.
Like, we might imagine the roughness of the nutshell, the softness of the squirrel's fur.
Okay.
And those imagined sensations can further enhance the experience, making it even more immersive and engaging.
So it's not just what we see and hear, it's what we imagine feeling, too.
Exactly. It's this whole multi-sensory experience that contributes to that feeling of well-being.
So it sounds like this feeling of healing that you get from watching squirrels, it's not just one thing, it's this whole combination of factors.
Exactly. It's our innate connection to nature, the inherent benefits of observing wildlife, the specific charm of squirrels, the mindfulness that comes with focused observation, and the calming sensory experience.
It's like all these things are woven together to create this really unique and personal experience.
Totally. And if we look at some well-established psychological theories, they can help us understand this even better.
Oh, like what?
Well, there's attention restoration theory, which suggests that spending time in nature, engaging in soft fascination, can help to restore our ability to focus.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like after staring at a screen all day, watching a squirrel feels so refreshing.
Right. And then there's stress reduction theory, which explains how observing something peaceful and content, like a squirrel happily munching on its nut, can trigger those feel-good emotions in us and reduce our own stress levels.
So it's not just about us taking a break, it's about observing a creature that's already in a state of relaxation.
Yeah. And of course, there's the emotional connection we can form with these little creatures.
That sense of kinship, right?
Yeah. And the way it encourages us to be present in the moment, which is so important for our well-being.
It's like a reminder to slow down, appreciate the little things.
Exactly.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. It's amazing to think that something as simple as watching a squirrel eat can be so beneficial for us.
It is, isn't it? And it really highlights how those small everyday encounters with nature can have a huge impact on our well-being.
So for you, our listener, who finds that sense of soul healing in watching squirrels, it seems like there's a whole web of reasons why that experience resonates so deeply with you. It's about that innate human connection to nature, the calming presence of wildlife, the mindful focus it encourages, and the soothing sensory experience, all wrapped up in that adorable nut-cracking package.
And it's a beautiful reminder that we don't need grand adventures to connect with nature. Those little moments, those tiny sparks of wonder, they're all around us if we just take the time to notice them.
So as you go about your day, keep an eye out for those little moments of peace and beauty in the natural world.
You might be surprised at what you discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.